Today we are going to discuss a very controversial topic, and it is one that I have considered for the podcast for months. But I also believe in being transparent about my healing journey. So we're going to dive into a personal story today because this topic did not start as a research project for me. It started as trying everything I could get my hands on. In 2024, I was diagnosed with something called MOGAD. That stands for myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein antibody-associated disease. It is a rare autoimmune condition where the body's immune system attacks a protein on the myelin sheath, the protective covering around your nerves. My body was attacking itself, and I had already had a stroke at 29 because of birth control. So my relationship with inflammation, with my immune system, with my nervous system has not been abstract. It has been very real and very personal. My neurologist wanted me to take all the medications. He said that he had only seen 2 other cases of MOGAD in his neurology practice, and both of them were women in their 40s who were blind and in a wheelchair. I don't know what my own future holds, but at that moment, I knew I had to be as proactive as possible with my health and not take the diagnosis lightly, even though I don't allow it to define me or my life. The doctor suggested steroids and immunosuppressant drugs like chemotherapy-type treatments to blunt my immune system. After years of research and studying for my Level 1 and Level 2 integrative health practitioner programs, I made the decision to try to recover naturally and at the genuine root of many of the things that cause autoimmune disease. No immunosuppressant drugs, no steroids, just an absolute commitment to learning everything I could about how the body heals, how inflammation works, and what tools exist outside of conventional pharmaceuticals. That journey led me even deeper into functional medicine, integrative health, and eventually into one of the most exciting and also one of the most misunderstood frontiers in biology right now, peptides. The word peptide sounds very clinical and complicated, but the concept is actually simple. Peptides are short chains of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. When a few of them link together, anywhere from 2 to about 50, they form a peptide. Your body already makes thousands of them. They act like chemical messengers, sending signals that tell your cells what to do: heal, regenerate, reduce inflammation, produce energy, build collagen, repair the gut lining. The reason peptides have exploded in conversation over the last few years is that researchers and clinicians have figured out how to study them, isolate the ones that produce specific beneficial signals, and in some cases, replicate or supplement them therapeutically. The global peptide therapeutics market was valued at over $50 billion in 2023 and is expected to grow significantly as the science matures. And really, let's be honest, one of the most common peptides is the GLP-1, which encourages weight loss. So it has gotten a lot of press and word-of-mouth exposure. Today, I want to walk you through just a few of the most important peptides being studied and discussed right now. Some are already FDA approved for specific conditions. Others are in what is called a research phase, meaning the human trial data is still building. I'm going to tell you what the science says, what each peptide actually does, and why it matters. And I want to be very clear as we go that this is an educational conversation, not medical advice. Peptides are powerful tools, and like any powerful tool, they need to be used under the guidance of a knowledgeable, qualified health practitioner. Let's start with the 2 glucagon-like peptides, GLP-1 and GLP-2, because they are the ones you have probably heard the most about, even if you did not know that is what you were hearing about. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. It is a hormone your body naturally produces in the L cells of the small intestine and colon in response to eating. Its original job was to stimulate insulin release, suppress glucagon, slow digestion, and signal the brain that you are full. When pharmaceutical companies figured out how to create synthetic versions that last much longer in the body than the natural peptide does, the drugs Ozempic and Wegovy were born. Those drugs use semaglutide, a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Tirzepatide, the active ingredient in Mounjaro and Zepbound, activates both GLP-1 and GIP receptors simultaneously. But what most people are not talking about is the anti-inflammatory dimension of GLP-1. This is where the science gets fascinating. A comprehensive review published in Frontiers in Immunology found that GLP-1 receptor agonists directly suppress inflammatory signaling. They inhibit the activation of something called the NF-kappa B pathway, which is essentially a master switch for inflammation in the body. They also decrease production of inflammatory cytokines, including TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 beta, and interleukin-6. For anyone dealing with chronic inflammation or autoimmune disease, those are names you want to become familiar with. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Immunology showed that GLP-1 receptor agonism can shift immune cells from a pro-inflammatory state to an anti-inflammatory one. Studies in clinical populations confirmed that semaglutide significantly reduced high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, which is a key marker of systemic inflammation in people with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. What really caught my attention was a 2024 study published in JAMA Ophthalmology from researchers at the Cleveland Clinic. They found that patients taking GLP-1 receptor agonists had a 51.7% reduced risk of developing non-infectious uveitis. Uveitis is an inflammatory eye disease often associated with autoimmune conditions. The researchers called this the first study to demonstrate a possible protective association between GLP-1 therapy and autoimmune disease. That is not a small thing. There is also promising research in neurological autoimmune conditions. Researchers at Johns Hopkins studied a long-acting GLP-1 receptor agonist called NLY01 in animal models of multiple sclerosis. They found it significantly delayed disease onset, reduced disease severity, and showed neuroprotective effects by inhibiting the activation of harmful immune cells in the central nervous system. MOGAD, the condition I have, shares some mechanisms with multiple sclerosis in that both involve the immune system attacking the protective myelin covering around nerves. So this research is very personal to me. Now, GLP-2 is the peptide that almost nobody is talking about, and it deserves a lot more attention. GLP-2 is co-secreted with GLP-1 from those same L cells in the gut, but it has a completely different job. GLP-2's primary mission is to protect and grow the lining of your intestine. Research published in the journal Microorganisms showed that GLP-2 acts as what they call a pleiotropic regulator of intestinal function. It promotes the growth and repair of the cells that line the gut, reduces intestinal permeability, and supports tight junction integrity. If you have ever heard the term leaky gut, what that really means is that those tight junctions between the cells of your gut lining have broken down, allowing partially digested food, bacteria, and toxins to pass through into the bloodstream, triggering systemic inflammation. GLP-2 helps prevent and repair exactly that. A recent study demonstrated that GLP-2 treatment decreased gut permeability and the systemic inflammatory phenotype in obese mice comparable to prebiotic intervention. Researchers concluded that a selective change in gut microbiota controls and increases endogenous GLP-2 production, which in turn improves gut barrier function. A phase 3 randomized controlled trial published in Gastroenterology in 2025 confirmed that a long-acting GLP-2 analog called glepaglutide significantly reduced the need for intravenous nutrition in these patients. The research conversation around GLP-2 and leaky gut, inflammatory bowel disease, and food sensitivities is growing. If your gut lining is compromised, and for many of us with autoimmune conditions or chronic inflammation, it absolutely is, GLP-2 is a peptide worth understanding. Now let's shift to the mitochondrial powerhouse of the peptide world. This one is called MOTSC, and it is extraordinary. What you need to know about MOTSC is simple. It is that it is encoded directly in the mitochondrial genome. Your mitochondria have their own DNA separate from the DNA in the nucleus of your cells. MOTSC is a 16 amino acid peptide that gets produced inside the mitochondria and then travels to the nucleus of the cell to regulate gene expression related to metabolism, stress response, and inflammation. Research published in Nature Communications demonstrated that MOTSC significantly enhanced physical performance in young, middle-aged, and old mice. It regulates skeletal muscle metabolism, improves insulin sensitivity, and can help the body respond better to metabolic stress. And here is the part that stopped me. Endogenous MOTSC levels in skeletal muscle increase approximately 11.9-fold following exercise. MOTSC is essentially a molecule your body produces when you exercise, and it is one of the reasons exercise is so protective against metabolic disease and aging. The challenge is that MOTSC levels decline with age and with poor metabolic health. Research from Frontiers in Endocrinology showed that blood MOTSC levels are lower in people with type 2 diabetes, obesity in children and adolescents, and coronary endothelial dysfunction. This matters because low MOTSC means your mitochondria are not communicating optimally with the rest of your body. That same research, published in Frontiers in Physiology in 2025, demonstrated that MOTSC treatment effectively restored mitochondrial respiration in a diabetic heart model, reduced blood glucose levels, and improved glucose handling. The researchers found it also reduced left ventricular wall thickness in the treated group, suggesting benefits for cardiac function in metabolic disease. Researchers have also noted that MOTSC may play a role in longevity in certain populations, with a genetic polymorphism in the MOTSC encoding region of mitochondrial DNA associated with extended lifespan. It is currently being studied for its exercise mimicking properties and is sometimes described as a candidate for what researchers informally call an exercise pill because it may produce some of the metabolic benefits of physical activity through molecular signaling alone. From a regulatory standpoint, MOTSC is currently on the World Anti-Doping Agency's prohibited list because of its performance-enhancing potential. Therapeutically, it is still experimental and is not FDA approved for human use. But the science behind it is genuinely compelling. And as delivery systems improve, this is one to watch. Now, I want to spend real time on 3 peptides that I think of as the healing trio because they are often discussed together and they work through complementary mechanisms. They are the foundation of my own healing along with KPV. These common healing peptides are BPC157, TB500, and GHK CU. And these are the ones that most people are talking about behind GLP-1s. Let's start with BPC157. The name stands for Body Protection Compound 157. It is a synthetic 15 amino acid peptide derived from a protein naturally found in human gastric juice. Yes, your stomach makes a version of this. It is stable in stomach acid, which makes oral administration potentially viable, and it has been studied for decades across an enormous range of biological systems. A systematic review published in the American College of Gastroenterology's official journal in October 2025 confirmed that BPC157 shows promise from preclinical studies for a range of gastrointestinal conditions, particularly in mucosal protection, wound healing, inflammatory bowel disease, and damage caused by NSAIDs like ibuprofen. The review noted that BPC157 appears to protect and repair the gut lining, reduce inflammatory markers including TNF-alpha, IL-6, and IL-1 beta, and support the tight junction integrity that keeps your gut barrier intact. What makes BPC157 particularly fascinating is the breadth of systems it influences. Research published in the journal Current Neuropharmacology documented its effects on what is called the brain-gut axis, the bidirectional communication network between your gut and your central nervous system. BPC 157 appears to influence serotonergic and dopaminergic signaling, modulate inflammation in both the gut and the brain, and support neurological function through its effects on peripheral tissue repair. BPC 157 also promotes angiogenesis, which is the formation of new blood vessels. This is critical for healing because injured tissues need blood flow. Without adequate blood supply, healing stalls. Research has shown BPC 157 accelerates recovery in tendon and ligament injury models, supports healing in muscle tears, and promotes repair of joint and bone tissue. A 2024 systematic review in a sports medicine journal found that BPC 157 improved recovery in various tissue injury models and reported little to no adverse effects in preclinical literature. The human trial data is still limited, which is why it remains investigational and why working with a qualified practitioner is essential. But the preclinical evidence is extensive and consistently positive. From a regulatory standpoint, as of early 2025, BPC 157 is not FDA approved and has faced regulatory challenges around compounding. The regulatory landscape is actively evolving, with advocacy groups pushing for proper clinical trials and formal FDA review rather than outright prohibition. TB500 is a synthetic fragment of thymosin beta-4, a naturally occurring protein involved in the organization of the cell's internal structure, cellular migration, and tissue repair. Research has shown that TB500 influences pathways involved in angiogenesis, cytokine production, and tissue remodeling, including the PI3K ACT and NF-kappa B signaling cascades. In practical terms, this means it supports new blood vessel formation and helps regulate the inflammatory response that follows injury. TB500 and BPC 157 are frequently discussed together because they appear to work through complementary mechanisms. BPC 157 tends to work more locally at the site of injury, particularly in the gastrointestinal tract and connective tissue. TB500 exerts broader systemic effects, influencing cell migration and circulation throughout the body. When used together in research protocols, the rationale is that they cover both local repair and systemic healing response. The combination is sometimes informally called the Wolverine protocol in research communities, which tells you everything you need to know about what the people using it are hoping to achieve. GHK CU is the third member of this healing trio, and in some ways it is the most extensively documented. GHK stands for glycyl L, histidyl L-lysine, which is a tripeptide that naturally occurs in human plasma, saliva, and urine. It binds to copper to form GHK-Cu, and in this copper-bound form, it is one of the most studied regenerative compounds in both cosmetic and biomedical research. Here is the remarkable thing about GHK-Cu. Research published in a 2018 review in PMC demonstrated that GHK-Cu influences the expression of over 4,000 human genes, many of which are related to tissue repair, anti-inflammatory signaling, antioxidant defense, and cellular maintenance. Gene profiling studies showed that GHK-Cu can essentially reset some age-related changes in gene expression, shifting aging cells toward patterns more consistent with younger, healthier cells. GHK-Cu levels naturally decline with age. At age 20, plasma levels are approximately 200 nanograms per milliliter. By age 60, those levels drop to around 80 nanograms per milliliter. This decline correlates directly with decreased healing capacity and the visible signs of skin aging. In clinical studies, GHK-Cu applied topically improved collagen production in 70% of women treated, outperforming both vitamin C cream and retinoic acid. A 2023 double-blind split-face study confirmed a 22% increase in skin firmness and a 16% reduction in fine lines after 12 weeks of GHK-Cu serum use. A 2024 clinical trial found that daily application of a GHK-Cu gel increased skin collagen density by an average of 28% after 3 months, with the top quartile of participants experiencing a 51% increase. Beyond aesthetics, GHK CU has demonstrated anti-inflammatory effects by reducing TNF-alpha-induced secretion of the inflammatory cytokine interleukin-6 in normal human dermal fibroblasts. Research suggests it can be used as a topical anti-inflammatory for skin conditions as an alternative to corticosteroids. It also promotes wound healing, hair follicle growth, liver tissue repair, and bone repair in various preclinical models. KPV is a small peptide derived from a naturally occurring protein in the body that plays a role in regulating inflammation and immune response. What makes it so unique is that it works upstream, meaning it helps calm inflammatory signaling at the source rather than just masking symptoms. It has been studied for its ability to reduce inflammatory cytokines, support the integrity of the gut lining, and promote healing in tissues that have been damaged by chronic inflammation. This is why you'll often see it used in areas like gut health, where it can help repair the intestinal barrier in conditions like Crohn's or colitis, as well as in skin health for issues like eczema or psoriasis. It also has broader applications for systemic inflammation, which is at the root of so many chronic health challenges. For me personally, KPV has been one of the tools I've leaned on as part of a much bigger, more holistic strategy in my recovery from MOGAD. I knew early on that I didn't just want to rely solely on steroids or immunosuppressants if I could support my body in other ways. A huge piece of that has been focusing on lowering inflammation at every level, especially in the gut, because the gut and immune system are so deeply connected. I've used KPV specifically to support gut healing, calm systemic inflammation, and help my body recover from mold toxicity, which I believe played a role in my overall health picture. It's not a magic solution, and it's not the only thing I've done, but it has been a powerful support in helping my body create a more stable, less inflamed internal environment while I continue to heal. Now let's talk about NAD, because this one sits at the very foundation of how your cells produce energy and how they age. NAD stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It is a coenzyme found in every single cell in your body. It is central to cellular energy metabolism, meaning it is involved in the process by which your cells convert food into usable energy in the form of ATP. Beyond energy production, NAD is essential for DNA repair, activation of proteins called sirtuins that regulate cellular aging, mitochondrial function, and the regulation of inflammation. Here is the problem. NAD levels decline with age. Research published at the National Institutes of Health estimated that NAD concentrations in human tissues may be 10 to 80% lower in older adults compared to younger adults. This decline has been linked to the progression of multiple chronic diseases, including neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic dysfunction. Research from the Buck Institute, published in Nature Metabolism, identified a specific mechanism driving NAD decline. Chronic inflammation triggers the accumulation of senescent cells, which are cells that have stopped dividing but remain metabolically active and secrete pro-inflammatory proteins. These senescent cells activate a protein called CD38 on immune cells, and CD38 degrades NAD. So the more chronic inflammation you have, the more NAD you lose. And the more NAD you lose, the less your cells can repair themselves, the more they age, and the more inflammation you get. It is a cycle. Research confirmed that supplementation with nicotinamide riboside, a NAD precursor, produced approximately 50 to 70% reductions in select plasma markers of inflammation, including interleukin-6, interleukin-5, and interleukin-2 in a clinical study. Chronic inflammation is a hallmark of aging and many autoimmune conditions, so these findings are meaningful. For anyone with an autoimmune condition or chronic inflammatory disease, the NAD inflammation connection is critical. Your immune cells need NAD to function properly. Research showed that in macrophages, NAD abundance decreases upon pro-inflammatory activation, and that this decline may actually promote further inflammation. Getting NAD levels back up through precursors like NMN and NR is being actively investigated in clinical trials for neurodegenerative diseases, and the early data is promising. I want to address something directly before we go further. You have probably noticed that several of the peptides I have discussed today are described as investigational, not yet FDA approved, or facing regulatory uncertainty. And you might be wondering why, if the science is this compelling, they are not already standard medical treatments. The answer is complicated. The regulatory pathway for pharmaceuticals in the United States requires extensive human clinical trials, which are extraordinarily expensive. Many of these peptides were discovered in academic or research settings, not by pharmaceutical companies, with the capital to fund those trials. Some have been difficult to patent because they occur naturally in the body, which means there is less financial incentive for a company to invest hundreds of millions in clinical development. And the FDA has been actively tightening oversight around compounding pharmacies that were producing many of these peptides, which has created significant access challenges. A 2024 legal settlement required the FDA to submit several peptides for review by the Pharmacy Compounding Advisory Committee before permanent prohibition, meaning that proper scientific evidence can now be presented. This is an evolving regulatory story, and it matters. It means the conversation is not closed. It means the science still has a seat at the table. And here in 2026, RFK Jr. has announced that the FDA will be approving a number of these peptides for different treatments and indications. This regulatory uncertainty is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they get interested in peptides. They see something compelling on social media, they find an online seller, and they buy a product with no idea about purity, dosage, sourcing, or whether it is appropriate for their specific health situation. Peptides sourced from unregulated online suppliers vary dramatically in quality and purity. Some products have been found to contain contaminants or to have significantly different concentrations than labeled. This is not a space to DIY without professional guidance. The second mistake is treating peptides as a replacement for foundational health. These compounds work best when they are layered on top of a clean diet, quality sleep, consistent movement, stress management, and proper micronutrient support. NAD precursors work better when inflammation is already being addressed through diet and lifestyle. GHK CU stimulates collagen synthesis more effectively in a body that has adequate protein intake. BPC 157 supports gut healing more powerfully when you are also removing the inflammatory foods that are damaging the gut in the first place. Peptides amplify a healthy foundation. They do not replace it. The third mistake is expecting immediate dramatic results. Most peptides work through cumulative cellular signaling over time. Tissue repair takes time. Collagen synthesis takes time. Mitochondrial function restoration takes time. People who approach this with patience and proper monitoring see the most meaningful outcomes. Here is what I want you to take away from today. Your body already speaks the language of peptides. These are not exotic foreign substances. They are signaling molecules your body uses and produces every day. What we are learning to do is understand those signals better, identify where deficiencies or imbalances exist, and explore how to support the body's own healing capacity. For me personally, addressing inflammation has been the central thread. NAD for cellular energy and mitochondrial function, the gut healing support of GLP-2 and BPC 157 for intestinal integrity, GHK CU for its broad anti-inflammatory and regenerative gene expression effects, GLP 1 for its anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective potential. Each of these addresses a different piece of the puzzle, and the puzzle for me has always been, how do I help my body heal itself rather than suppress it into submission? Here are your 5 action steps. Step 1. In the next 7 days, get educated on your own baseline. I believe that before you ever consider any peptide therapy, you need to know where your body actually stands. That means functional lab work, inflammatory markers like HSC, RP, and homocysteine, fasting insulin and blood glucose, comprehensive metabolic panel, hormones. This is a test don't guess situation. You cannot navigate where you want to go if you do not know where you are starting. I have a great company that I recommend that is super reasonable for a full comprehensive 100 plus marker blood test. You can find the link in the show notes. Step 2, in the next 30 days, find a qualified practitioner who is knowledgeable in peptide therapy and integrative medicine. If you're looking to discuss this further, send me a message. I work with a certified 503, a compounding pharmacy, and a telehealth provider where you can actually get the support and the prescriptions you need to have any of these peptides compounded specifically for you. Step 3, build your foundation first. Please know that although I love peptides, they are not a quick fix, and they are not the first thing to fix. Please commit to addressing the basics in parallel with any peptide exploration. Anti-inflammatory nutrition, quality sleep, consistent movement, stress reduction. If you are dealing with gut issues, begin supporting the gut with food and evidence-based supplements before or alongside any peptide protocol. Remove the things breaking the gut down before you add in the things designed to build it back up. Again, if this is something you are interested in, please join me in the collective or for a personal private consult to see if I can help. Step 4, if you are specifically interested in anti-aging and skin health, GHK CU is one of the areas where topical options exist and where the clinical evidence is strong enough that it can be a lower risk entry point, like topical skincare. Look for formulations that list copper tripeptide 1 in the ingredients and that are stored in airless or opaque packaging to maintain stability. This is a meaningful place to start learning what this peptide can do without injections. Step 5, follow the regulatory updates. The peptide landscape is changing rapidly. The FDA is actively reviewing several compounds. The science is accumulating. New delivery systems are being developed. Stay connected to reliable sources, peer-reviewed research, and reputable integrative health practitioners, not social media influencers. Thank you for spending this time with me today. This topic matters deeply to me, not just as a health practitioner, but as someone navigating my own healing. I hope this gave you a clearer picture of what is happening in the world of peptides, and more importantly, why it is worth paying attention. I would love to work with you inside the collective or to answer any questions you may have on how peptides may be a fit in your healing journey. Just send me a DM at Amy Mewborn on Instagram or an email through my website, and we'll figure out the best journey for you. And if you are a fitness or wellness studio that is thinking that you might want to add peptides to your offerings for clients, please let me know. Many of your clients are already looking at their options and may be investing in this technology for their own healing journey. It is a great topic for you to bring to clients and generate significant recurring monthly revenue. Until next time, keep it simple, keep it intentional, and keep healing.